Hi, everyone. We'll be getting started in just a moment. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here at our first ever Chronic Boss Summit. I am so excited that we have DK with us today. DK is amazing, and she ran this stress resilience workshop that she's going to run with us today for our membership a couple months ago, and people just absolutely loved it. So that's why we've invited her to be a part of the summit today. A couple of reminders and announcements before we get going, and I pass things over to DK. So first of all, this is our first summit. You will be able to access these recordings from the summit for a week following. So up until October 7th, we will have these open on the platform. And then after that point, you will need to be a member of the Chronic Boss Collective to access the recordings. So please do keep that in mind. DK is also raffling off. She has generously allowed us to raffle off some Pilates sessions, some virtual Pilates sessions with her. And all of you who are here with us right now as live attendees will be entered to win that. We will be doing that via, we've collected everyone's emails who is here live, and we will be putting that into a randomizer generator, and we will be following up with the winner after the summit session between today and tomorrow. So please keep an eye on your email for that. And I'd like to thank our sponsors, Lauren Perna Communications and Clear to Flourish, who have made this possible. We are so thrilled to have them sponsoring us. Both are members of the Chronic Boss Collective, Lauren Perna and Laurie Butson, and both are speaking. Laurie will be up next. She is moderating the corporate Chronic Boss panel, and Lauren Perna is doing her famous Level Up on LinkedIn workshop later in the summit. So definitely be sure to check those out. And finally, our membership is open. We're very excited about this. It is the final opportunity to enroll as a member of the Chronic Boss Collective this year. You will have until October 7th to do so at the $50 off price as a registrant of the Chronic Boss Summit. And that means that you would be paying $397 a year for the full year. And if you want to learn more about member benefits, you can join us at the info session happening on the final day of the summit, October 2nd. Okay, so I think with that, I'm going to go ahead and invite DK up on stage to take over. DK, I see you're with us. Do you want to just come off of mute and video?
Yeah, I'm getting an error that the host has not enabled me to take myself off video.
Oh, no.
So I don't know if I think I'm signed in and I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, thank you all so much for bearing with us for one moment. I am going to make you a co-host, DK, and let's see if that helps with video. And if not, then I am going to there we go. There we go. Thank you everybody for bearing with us. This is our first time doing it. So, we've Zoom webinar is just a touch different from Zoom meetings. So we're working through it. But DK, thank you for being here. You are such a rock star in this space, and I'm thrilled to have you. And I'm going to take myself off video so that it can be fully focused on you. And also, just so you know, we do have a Q&A section going on, and so it won't necessarily pop up in the chat. But
are folks able to enter things in the chat though, or is that disabled?
Let me work on that.
Okay.
Let me work on that. Right now, I don't think the chat is disabled currently. Thank you, Lori. So just give me a moment because I might be able to put that together, but I'm going to pass it over to you to get started, and I will pop into live. Okay. Thanks so much.
Thanks. All right, folks. Well, super excited to be here with you. And this is a topic that is really near and dear to my heart, and I'm excited to be bringing it to the summit. I hope you're having an awesome time so far. We've got such an amazing lineup. of rock star folks to speak with you, and it's really exciting to be a part of it. So I'm going to assume, unless someone tells me otherwise, that my screen is visible. I have some slides up now. Do let me know if that's not something you see right now. So we're going to do radical stress resilience, which I consider the ultimate self-care workshop because we're talking about how we protect ourselves from the chaos of the outside world. And I would argue one of the most important things we could be doing for our health. So a little bit about me. You've already heard a bit of an intro from Lily, but I own a business called Movement Remedies, which is a pain-focused Pilates studio and wellness coaching program. It started in Boston, and I have only recently, with my family, relocated to Edinburgh, Scotland. So we'll soon be getting going there. Um, and I see that the chat is okay, AI person. So I'm really focused on not just working with chronic pain, that is a huge emphasis of the work that I do with movement, but also I really want to work with people who feel unseen or unwelcome in traditional health and wellness spaces, which I think is honestly a lot of people. And when it comes to chronic pain in particular, where people feel really dismissed and things, showing up into health and wellness spaces can be really intimidating. So that is the group that I enjoy working with. And so that's near and dear to my heart, as I said. So you're probably wondering, okay, so now we have a chronic pain person talking to us about stress. I don't get it. So let me give you a little bit of background about me. This picture you see, this lady in the very fabulous orange getup, is me at 13. So I was very, very dedicated to musical theater as a young person and dance. And it was in not this particular show, but this when I was doing performances of this production over the summer, that summer I had my first debilitating low back pain. Thank you for the chat. Okay, so just so you know, quick administrative thing, we're going to use the chat for the reflection parts of the discussion. I think if there's a Q&A thing, we should definitely send Q&A there. I'm not going to be checking for questions, but we are going to have a little bit of a reflection piece that will be very obvious, and I'll let you know when to go in the chat. Okay, so I had in the middle of a performance, like lightning bolt of pain that sent me into like writhing, trying to figure out what to do and couldn't move. And that became actually a pattern in my teen years and 20s. And so low back pain has been just sort of like I'm an only child, so it's like the sibling I never knew I needed and wanted, a little bit of a companion throughout my life. And it really wasn't until my mid to late 30s that I started to really peel apart how what was showing up in my physical body was tied to underlying issues with anxiety. And I'll tell you a little story. So around 2017, I was very much at the pinnacle of my corporate career. I had been in management consulting in a top 5 firm. I had left to be an executive in a product management area. It was, really C-suite connected, and I felt like I was pushing and pushing and pushing myself to be at the top of my career. And I had just given a presentation at work and felt pretty good about it, moved on to the next thing. And then just as I'm starting to leave the meeting, I suddenly feel like a fish out of water, like I can't breathe. So I wait to see what happens next. I get nauseous and all these other feelings. I'm like, okay, something's wrong. I must be something I ate. And I, shut the meeting down. But then from there, it was like weak in the knees, you know, my intestines felt all crazy. I thought I was going to pass out. I curl up into a ball and I'm like, honey, call the ambulance because I'm definitely dying right now. And I think unless you've had that experience of a panic attack where it's like this cloud rolls in and sort of like Wizard of Oz voice that's like, this is the moment where you die, sort of comes into your brain. It's like you can't not think that you're dying. And that was a really new experience for me and terrifying. This was also in the middle of a huge pain flare up, by the way, as an aside, that had been going on for weeks. And I was going through some major transition in my personal life. So, of course, I was annoyed that I had to cancel my afternoon meetings, and it passed, after some time. It really was 4 days of this happening that I finally brought myself to urgent care because I'm like, okay, we need to get my heart checked. Like, obviously, something is super wrong. So I'm like waiting for the results of the EKG and things, and I'm gonna get answers, and I go back to work. It's gonna be fine. And someone just comes in with a little clipboard and was like, ma'am, you're fine. You're just having panic attacks. And I mean, there's so much wrapped up in just that sentence, but first of all, it's not fine to feel like you're dying. Um, and I think we have this, strange thing in the health spaces where we kind of dismiss things that are attributable to a state of mind as a root cause, as being like not as problematic or concerning as other things. And I also felt nothing but shame in that moment because all I could reflect on was like, here I was supposed to be this accomplished person, and I couldn't even do my job because I like literally couldn't physically sit at my desk without thinking my life was over. And I really had to have a moment of kind of asking myself what I was doing it all for. And this is what sent me on a journey that ultimately led me to taking my Pilates practice, turning it into teaching, getting underneath my issues with pain. And at the bottom of all of this, I really felt, like I said, that there was an interwoven thread of the pain that I had been experiencing for decades, anxiety, OCD, and other issues and intrusive thoughts and things that had been sort of following me for a long time with no label on them. And I really understood that I had to get to the heart of myself in order to answer the call of my body, really trying to call attention. So I give you that background as sort of where I came from, and I think hopefully a relatable story for many. So let's start by talking about what stress is. This is the CDC's definition and the US Public Health Organization, which is that it stresses how our body responds to pressures or tension. And what I find really interesting about this is that um, it inherently acknowledges the physical nature of stress, that it's not just like a thing that happens out of nowhere and, only certain people are going to have any experience related to it. It's inherently a physical thing. And I think a lot of times we vilify stress and we don't necessarily have a healthy understanding of how to how to cope with it without labeling ourselves as being ineffectual in our jobs and things like that. So here's what I'm hoping we're going to get to today. I want to make sure we have time to address how stress affects our body and when to intervene. We should know that. Experience some movement and how that movement changes according to our intention. We're going to do a bit of movement. We're going to get rid of self blame associated with stress in our daily lives, and then know what you need to prevent negative stress effects. So each person is going to need something unique, and I'm hoping we can get somewhere in identifying that for you today. And then make an informed commitment to increasing your stress resilience. So you should have a chair. We are going to do some movement, but it is chair based, and hopefully it's one you can sit tall in. So maybe not one that you can roll all over the floor if you can kind of make that happen. A journal for note taking. We are, as I mentioned, going to have some reflection in the chat, and then an open mind for discussion today. So let's start right away with some movement. I'm going to, let's see, pause the share, I think. Maybe that's better. I want you to be able to see me because we're going to do some movement. All right, so you're going to take your chair and you're going to sit on the front edge of your chair. Okay, so my sitting bones are right there. And we're going to plant those feet right into the floor. If you can take off your shoes, I'd really like you to do that. So as I said, this is the movement without intention. So I want you to do the opposite of what I would ever tell you in a session, which is let your mind wander. Be focused on what's around you, okay? We're going to start by just dropping the heels into the ground. So you're going to pick the heels up and drop them down. And you're going to just feel sitting really tall, and you're noticing how that makes you feel, but you're not going to be super intentional about it, super mindful. You're going to just let everything, now that your mind has stopped, let your mind be filled with the pouring in of all the things. And then you're going to pick up the toes, drop the toes down, but the heels stay still, tapping. You see how there's like a natural rocking in the body? That's totally fine. And then we're going to alternate. So you're going to drop those heels, bang into the floor, toes. You don't need to be gentle. Your floor can take it. We're going to just really kind of give it a push and a drop and toes and a drop and toes. And we're going to alternate. Yep. You want to put on some favorite music while we're doing this? That's awesome. Okay, now I want you to press your right foot into the floor as hard as you can. Squeeze your muscles all the way up and sit tall. Release it. Press the other foot, push, 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 sit tall, release it. Press the right foot, release it. Press the left foot and release it. We're going to turn this into a march. Arms are crossed. Push your right foot down, feel how it lifts you, and then march the other foot off the ground. I'm like going like 3 inches, it's not far. And you're going to pick up the other knee. Marching in place. Use those muscles, lift your leg. Use the other muscles, push the foot down. Both legs working at the same time. Okay, still sitting with your sitting bones on the edge of the seat. You're going to hook your fingers around the base of your skull. Really sit tall. We're going to lean to one side and come up straight. Lean to the other side. Come up straight. Remember, notice things in your room. Allow yourself to be drifted by the external things around you. Allow your body to move without being focused on how it feels. Twist and center. Press those feet, twist and center. Obviously staying within a safe range of motion here. Hopefully we're keeping this confined to the relatively comfortable position. One more each side. Okay, we're gonna do a bit of rounding of the spine. I want your hands on your knees. I want you to be able to see this. So you're gonna tuck your tail as if you're trying to push a little ping pong ball with your pubic bone forward. Tuck your tail and roll, roll, roll. You see my whole back is rounded. Maybe you can roll until you tap the seat. You're staying rounded to come forward. And then once you come back, you're sitting up tall. And my kind of breastbone is lifted a little bit. We tuck the tail again, push the little ping pong ball forward. Hands are just gliding along the thighs here, and then push the ping pong ball backwards with your tail. One more time, roll back. Roll it forward, chest to ceiling. Come back to a spine where you feel stacked over your heels. And we're going to roll those shoulders. So shoulders up, inhale, and down. Yep, just roll them back, up and back rather, and down. And press your feet into the floor. We're going to take a great big inhale, reach those arms up. And then exhale, shake it out, shake it out, shake it out. Inhale, reach those arms up. Shake it out, shake it out, shake it out. And then you can shake your feet out, shake it all out. All right, now hopefully we're feeling a little perked up. All right, we're going to go back into presentation. There it is. Okay. All right, that was your movement without intention. And I would like to know, take a moment, what did you notice in your body during that movement experience, if anything? What was getting your attention? Was it possible for you to stay detached? Were you able to be sort of your mind wandering while you were doing the movement? Any other reflections? I mean, did it feel good? Did it feel bad, indifferent, kind of boring? I'm really just honest reflections here. I'm going to look into the chat. Feel free to share any of your thoughts in the chat. It's not a requirement, but it's helpful for me to see how folks are experiencing things. Yep, yep, that's for sure. It's very easy to think about all that we need to do. Okay, so hopefully the back, yes, good. Loosening of tension, great. A little warm. Good. That's great. So the movement helped to bring you into some awareness of your body. Yes. Great. Being free. That's true. Being focused on the breath can definitely be even a distraction itself. Yes, it's very hard to detach with the pain coming up, that's for sure. Yes, good. Okay, thank you so much. You can certainly continue to share reflections. That's great. So we're going to do this movement sequence again with a bit of intention and a different cueing on my part. So I'll be very curious to see how that experience is for you. So now let's take a little detour quickly. Um, and I think it's interesting because the nervous system definitely has like more visibility from like a pop health perspective. So I think folks are really becoming more aware of this, but you know, I think it's important to remember that your autonomic nervous system, which is really your automatic stuff, right? The heart rate and your breath, thank goodness we don't have to think about that. That'll be a lot to think about. So we have the functions that we associate with what happens during a sympathetic part of the nervous system, and then we have that parasympathetic. Now, there's a lot of research that's come out, especially around the polyvagal stuff, that says that it's really not like a train switch where you're either sympathetic or parasympathetic. There's some states where you can be some combined. But for our purposes, even if it's oversimplifying, I think understanding that we have this fight or flight pathway and we have this rest and digest pathway. So my heart pumps and my eyes dilate and I'm like ready to run or fight if I need it, right? That's my sympathetic. And that's also a part of the nervous system that gets triggered during pain. Or I'm feeling rest and I'm feeling safety. And that's when like sexual function, digestion, and your like slowed heartbeat, that's when that starts to come into play. So understanding that this is just part of how we have evolved over time, and the fact that we have a sympathetic nervous system is part of what keeps us alive, right? It would be super bad if I stood in a street trying to cross the street and a bus is bearing down on me and I did not have the immediate knee-jerk reaction of jumping out of the way, right? So I think we have to take a moment to also not vilify stress. And I think especially for those of us with chronic conditions, there's that like stress is always listed as a trigger, infuriatingly, for just about everything. And so then the answer is like, well, you should just reduce your stress. Like, yeah, I'm going to book that beach vacation for the next 11 months. That's going to be great. I mean, it's just not realistic. And it also sort of makes it feel like we're supposed to somehow avoid stress, right? Or it's a problem. But you hear these stories of people who have feats of strength, like look at the Olympics. You think their sympathetic nervous systems were not, super activated during those moments of incredible achievement? Like my sympathetic nervous system is definitely like flaring up right now. I mean, it's important to have those moments that we need it because, if we're looking at why we've evolved, it's because the dudes who didn't have that probably got eaten by, insert predator. So we have this reaction because it has been part of our survival. And pain is the same thing. Pain and stress are both the brain's response to something in the environment that it perceives as a threat. And so that automatic threat response is a lifesaver. And of course, we are in a modern age. So our the primitive brain and those components of the brain that are evolved at a time when we needed them, they don't really understand if the threat in the environment is like legitimately, I might lose a limb in this moment, or it's just my boss is breathing down my neck and causing a great deal of stress and pressure in my life. It can't really tell if it's life or death or not. So bursts of stress are good. Bursts of stress cause us to be hyper focused and can, perform. The issue is that if stress is continuously being triggered in our bodies, where this like sympathetic response is emphasizing a higher heart rate, reduced emphasis on digestion and things, that has been tied to many different long-term, conditions that show up physically. So we know from the research, immune systems can be compromised over time, greater risk of infection, digestive upset hugely associated with chronic stress, inflammation in the body, which is, a lot of these things are tied to why chronic stress can be a flare trigger for chronic conditions, but also even increased risk of cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, and stroke. We can even see changes in cognition and decision making, focus, and mood if you're constantly in that sympathetic, fight or flight, life or death situation state of mind. And then it does have an effect on your ability to also tolerate pain because your nervous system being overly sensitized, if you're already in that hypervigilant state, suddenly your threshold decreases, not always, but it can. And that means that something that shows up for you when you're already feeling that chronic stress state may feel differently, may feel worse than for someone who's not in that state, and it distorts the pain response. So the long-term physical consequences, again, I think it's well documented. I don't think any of this is news, but the issue is how do we make sure that we can harness the benefits of responding to stress while preventing a kind of pattern in our bodies that leads to long-term physical issues. And so being resilient in the face of stress, and again, this is an oversimplification, but it's really about that stress and recovery. It's about knowing what in your life and what situations are going to cause you to really be in that fight or flight state, and how can you proactively get yourself a strategy that helps you bring yourself back into that rest and recovery. And it's really about making sure we do it as a practice, as stewardship of our bodies, and also in managing our relationships to the environment. So I think there are three main obstacles that prevent us from stress resilience as a goal. Because again, we are not the problem. And I just want to keep saying that it's not the issue that we're all experiencing negative effects of stress because we are inherently deficient in our ability to manage stress. There are other things going on here, and that's what I really want to tackle. And that's, I guess, where you get to the radical bit. So the first obstacle to stress resilience is that most people cannot sense their bodies really at all. I could probably stop there, but cannot sense the stress effects in the body as it's happening. And this happens a lot with pain, um, because people are just inherently detached. And now, why is that? So physical sensations are often in happening in the background unless they are sort of really profoundly jarring or scary, right? And so we're going to talk about some of these reasons why. And again, I think I'm speaking, I know, to an informed audience here, so I'm sure that you will see some of these as resonating. So modern society demands constant response to stimuli. Like your nervous system can only process so much information in a day. The brain processes like a fraction of what it actually sees. So how can we possibly feel everything all of the time if you're just inundated, right? It's like trying to just pour water on a pool that's already full. It's all complicated by the fact that our technology is now attached to us, so we're having to respond all of the time. And so how can you be in your body when everything outside of you is demanding a response? It's just very difficult. And the demand of a thing outside of you is so much noisier than the thing inside of you. And I also want to just make a comment um, about what I think is a distinctly American obsession with productivity as worth. And I think inside the chronic condition community in particular, we have to really fight this paradigm because this is a puritanical ideology that your works basically kind of denote you as having value in your community, and that is a really difficult thing if you feel like on some days you're not able to be as productive as the person next to you, right? But I'm here to say you have inherent worth as a human being on this earth with something of value to offer, and it has absolutely nothing to do with your productivity. So we need to dismantle that as in itself. But that pressure really leads to push, output, 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 output without any space or time for nurturing, relationships and, inner well-being and things like that. I have a particular issue with diet culture because I know I've seen it play out with my clients, and I know in my own world that because I was feeling pressure to be in a certain body shape because I wanted to be a dancer and on stage so bad, I started training myself to ignore grumblings of hunger when I was like 12, and that stayed with me. And anyone who's been through restrictive dieting, you're not going to be successful unless you learn to ignore what is probably the most like significant and fundamental human survival signal, and that's hunger. Because, the being pushed to eat in times of potential famine is again, part of how we made it as far as a species. And so it's positively bonkers if you think about it that we would ever go through such efforts to remove that from our vocabulary, but we do. And what message are we giving the body? We're telling our bodies that they're wrong, that what they're trying to tell us is wrong. And so what else are we ignoring? And then we add on to this a whole layer of trauma. And, I went to a conference in Boston in May for the Trauma Research Foundation. It was really, really interesting. And depending on whose definition you use, you could basically argue that up to 90% of adults have experienced trauma in their lives. So that's if you kind of layer that on, and the fact that we all know it's well documented that kind of disassociating from our environment is a coping mechanism for traumatic experiences. And I mean, surely all of us here who've lived through COVID, like that in of itself is traumatic. We have basically a plethora of reasons why being disconnected from the physical sensations is the norm. And so trying to cultivate that back is a challenge. So we're going to have another reflection exercise. And I just want you to first, before we go into the chat, I want you to close your eyes and think about a time when you were stressed and put yourself in the moment fully. Like, can you remember what you were wearing, what the weather was like, what you were doing, what time of day it was? And in that moment, how do you know that you were stressed? I bet you went to a moment right away, but the interesting thing is, how did you know? I bet you felt something in your body that told you this is a moment of high stress. What is that thing? What is that physical tell for you that was, I'm in an experience of high stress? And if you feel up for sharing it in the chat, I'll go ahead and pull that up and would love to see it. Yes, severe tension. Yep. We don't notice it in that moment, do we? That is so common. Yes, you could experience them as very similar. So stress is kind of generalized. Anxiety is like a specific reaction pathway, I would say. Shoulder and back tension, thoughts are racing. Yep. Yeah, okay. So like a shutting down. Totally. Any stomach? Stomach folks? Definitely a stomach person right here. I get it right in the gut. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Back hurts. Elephant on the chest. Yep. Yep. Yeah. So, okay. So, what I think hopefully you can kind of see that I think is really interesting is that, first of all, a lot of people have a kind of very distinct physical experience, and it's different, which I think is also like already just kind of dispels this myth that, like, oh, stress is a thing we manage. Because how can you when everyone's experience of stress and their way of that stress shows up in their body is so different? It's as unique as you are. So there is no one pathway for this, right? And I think that that's like an important learning. And we can only really make headway in this area when we know what our experience of stress is, not this kind of like golden ideal of, Bob goes to work. Bob never worries about anything. Bob goes home and finishes his work. Bob keeps showing up to the really stressful meetings. Like that's just kind of this silly, like child book, like example of what a person at work is. And I don't know where that came from. I mean, I do, but we won't go there. Um, and we need to actually remember that we're humans first, humans with nervous systems and physical experiences, and we carry all of our history with us and all of our physiology with us, right? Okay, back to some movement. My favorite part. You got to be careful because if you let me go, we'll move for like the next 40 minutes. Okay, I won't. Now we'll focus. All right, get back on your chair. So I am of the opinion that meditation, especially in high stress moments, and as a person with anxiety, meditation doesn't really work for me very well because if I'm not moving my body and I'm hyper focused on my breath, I actually become like super hyper vigilant and I find it very difficult. So for me, movement has been a meditative practice, and I want to sort of offer that to you as a way of thinking about movement. And I think coming from a diet culture perspective, we also think of movement as, did I burn off my turkey sandwich? And I just want to release all of that, please, because as far as I'm concerned, the number one thing we can be doing for our health is moving, and moving because it does way more things in our body than burns calories. Okay, we're gonna go back to our original movement pattern. Okay, so we're starting with those heels, but now I want you to feel as you drop your heels into the ground, how does it reverberate into your legs? And so I call it exploratory movement because it's like you drop something into the pond and then you wait to see what the ripples are. I want you to move and then experience the response in your body and then react to the response. You may decide to do something slightly differently. It does not have to be exactly like me. Okay, and then we're going to drop those toes down. And then think about the muscles in your body. Try to be as internally focused as you can. What muscles are having to work? Do you notice a rocking in your body that has to happen in order to make the lifting of the toes happen? Isn't that interesting? Drop the heels and the toes, and we're going to alternate heels and toes. And I want you to think about the language inside your head. If you're anything like me, the voice that's the default is kind of a jerk. So maybe we can put some really nice things into our bodies here. Maybe think I am strong, I am resilient, and heels and toes. I am capable. Whatever you want to say, speak powerfully into your body as you move. And this can be your affirmations practices, moving with intention, moving as a way of honoring the body. We're going to press one foot into the floor, sit up really tall, feel how the pushing down just lifts you naturally. And then feel what it's like to take that away. Press the left foot down, and the lengthening happens naturally. We often put the posture right in the back, but it could be from the floor. Isn't that cool? And then switch to the right foot again. We're going to cross the arms. As you're pressing the foot into the floor, can you try to lift one knee without tipping too much? And let's take an inhale. Push the foot into the floor. Exhale, lift the other leg. Push the foot into the floor. Exhale, lift. Feel your strength. Visualize yourself as a tree, rooting your feet into the ground, feeling how you can shift side to side and stay centered. Okay, plant those 2 feet. Your tree roots are still growing into the floor. Hook your hands onto the base of the skull here. Lifting up really tall. Take a big inhale through the nose. Yes, definitely do it while standing, 100%. Exhale, laterally bend. Inhale, stand up or sit up. Exhale, laterally bend. Now I want you to experience inhaling on the bend. So now inhale as you laterally bend. Exhale as you come up. Does it change the movement for you? Does it put the work in a different place? Does one breathing pattern have a pain response and the other one has some ease? We can use movement to learn so much about what's going on in our bodies and our minds. We're going to plant the feet. We're going to rotate, ring out the ribs with a breath. Inhale, center. Really tall, using those feet, sitting or standing. Exhale, twist. Think about rotating here with the inhale. And again, see if that maybe the inhale is an enabling experience for you there. And maybe the exhale is. You can use your breath to make movement more fluid, less discomfort. We're going to release there, hands on the knees, or roll back, tuck your tail, push the ping pong ball forward. And you're going to roll, and you'll see if you can tap your back on the chair. And then you're going to come up through center, heart to the ceiling. Let's take that exhale, roll back, and just let this flow. Feel your hands against your legs. Feel your feet against the ground. Feel how your pelvis changes shape and it changes your spine's shape, right? You don't have to effortfully bend your back. If you tip from the pelvis, it just sort of happens. And you can still do this with a against a wall, even if you want, if you're doing this standing. Open the heart, play with the breath. I like to visualize I'm like the ocean. I find the ocean peaceful. So, like the waves rolling in, rolling out, natural undulation of the spine. And then you're going to take your roll. Inhale the shoulders up, exhale them down. Now, let's experience the difference between tension and release. Squeeze your fist, pull your shoulders up. It's like, ugh, kind of icky. And then exhale, let it go. Maybe you need to shake it out. Maybe that was a little too much tension. Inhale, bring it in. Press your feet. Squeeze your tush under you. And shoulders up. Oh my goodness, so much tension. Exhale, release. So again, they talk in the polyvagal research about the importance of teaching our bodies to feel the difference between tension and release. Because a lot of times, as someone mentioned, we're tense and we can't tell because we actually haven't differentiated in our brain tension versus release. All right, breathe it in. Check it out. All right. We're going to go back into the work. Okay. So now, of course, we're going to think about how did that differ from the previous experience for you? Or didn't it? It's okay if it didn't. Um, was it, yeah, what were you able to find that difference of a more embodied experience of movement? Did you have any aha moments or anything that you would like to share? Hmm. Yeah, the breath is such an enabler. We always say that the breath is like one of the most powerful mobilizers we have because it naturally moves the body more relaxed. Mm, yep. Yeah, and it matters how we move too. I think sometimes if we move in a really tense way, the negative energy can get sort of stored. We're connected. Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your reflections. And I think it's important to notice like we didn't work up a sweat, right? Like nobody's going to be pumping iron like from this movement series. But I hope you can see that it has value in that it helps us get connected to our bodies, and also just by making little tweaks to the way in which we move, we can make any kind of movement experience a more connected and nourishing experience physically and emotionally. All right. So I'd like to ask you, were you able to access a sense of peace during the movement? It's okay if not. I know we're in the middle of like a presentation, so it's maybe not the place. If not now, perhaps you can think back to a time where you felt really at peace and calm. It could be, hopefully you don't have to go too far back. Um, and then I want to ask you the same thing I did for the stress moment. What are the physical signs? How do you know you felt calm and peaceful in the moment? And I always struggle because I find that when I look back and I reflect on moments like this for myself, it's the absence of stress or tension that I notice. But is there something inherent about that state, a tingling, a warmth, what does it really feel like to be at peace in that moment? Because I think we can very easily conjure up moments of tension and stress in our bodies. Can we cultivate a practice of conjuring up peace and calm in our bodies? And that's a lot of what meditation is really about. Um, but yeah, let me know. Do you know some physical signs of what it's like to be at peace in your body? Can you put words to what that is for you? Hmm. Right. So not having that hypervigilance, sort of like the absence of things, feeling light. Hmm. Yeah, no, it's hard. It's very difficult being able to be present. So like polyvagal theory talks about that the ability to be social and attached comes from your being at rest and really feeling safe. And so it's so hard to articulate safety. But in a world full of trauma, I mean, safety is a really important and valuable thing to go after. So in interest of time, I will move on. But I encourage you to continue reflecting on that because think of how powerful it would be to be able to conjure up the physical manifestation of peace in the way that we can conjure up stress. And that it already is a sign, right? Like we spend much more time in one versus the other. Okay, so I think someone already kind of noted this in the chat, but you know, I think the second obstacle to stress resilience is just the vernacular that's used in the workplace of like stress management, as if stress management is like time management and you can just like take a course and be better at managing stress, which is ridiculous. I have a major issue with this term. I have an issue with a lot of terms that have the word management in them, and maybe it's because I was a management consultant, so I just get grumpy. But there's a lot of things that can't be managed. And just because you put a word on it doesn't mean it's true. So, it insinuates that stress effects can be controlled. But first of all, as we've already talked about, it's your autonomic nervous system that is triggering physical responses in your body. So, by very definition, it can't be controlled. And also, the things that stress us the most are usually the things outside of our control. Grief and loss is outside of your control. Suddenly losing your job or having a financial burden is outside of your control. So, what am I managing here, folks? It kind of just sounds like I'm making stress less of your problem. And that doesn't solve anything for the individual. So it also, again, it's back to that blame culture, as if the effects are like the sufferer's responsibility to fix and they're responsible for it, like they made it. Um, but we are each reacting differently based on our unique histories and traumas. And everything about this term dismisses that in its inherent definition. And so we have to also remember that like the paradigm we live in is outdated and was created, long before women or people of color were in the workforce. So like even how we think about showing up at work or stress management or time management for that matter, like doesn't really meet our needs. And so if I can leave you with anything, it's that the system is the stressor, right? The environment is the stressor. You are not the problem. Um, I'm going to have this not go into the chat just for the benefit of time, but I think that it's interesting to take a little detour here and explore aspects of your personality that you've been told in a work environment were detrimental. And I can tell you, like, for example, I was always told to toughen up. It was like my sensitivity or my passion or whatever were getting in the way of me being a good, strong leader and being able to deliver feedback and all these things. And, what I didn't realize at that time is that actually these these qualities were superpowers for me elsewhere. And it wasn't until I really realized my like purpose that I saw that, wow, working with people in chronic pain actually requires that I have like empathy and I don't need to be ashamed for that being part of who I am. And also, isn't that like a distinctly patriarchal request for the workplace? Um, so anyway, again, I would love to spend time in here, but for the interest of time, I would encourage you to go and maybe think about the ways in which, part of what people are interpreting as stress management is actually trying to get you to tone down qualities that just don't fit a super patriarchal mold of what work is and what leadership is. And like maybe that's okay. And I'm sure if you reflect on those things, you would actually realize that you have that ability to tap into that elsewhere. So the third obstacle, again, really just hones in on the system a little bit more, which is the fact that we just are not acknowledging this problem. In the US in particular, we don't really see health as a human right. And we don't see chronic stress as a health crisis, even though chronic stress has been tied to like all of the major things that lead to mortality and, lower quality of life, we're sort of acting like it's outside of what's really solvable. And I think it's because our health system really doesn't know what to do. And also, of course, we don't want to undercut capitalism, but that's, this is not an anti-capitalism talk. Um, but what we can do is choose self-care, choose to set the boundaries that we need, choose to see chronic stress and its effects on our bodies as the health like epidemic that it is, and also help those around us to advocate for themselves, create work environments and other environments where they can advocate for themselves. And though it's, well, as I said, well documented that chronic stress leads to life-threatening illness, it doesn't have to be the norm, even though it's common. And all the information that we need, and I guess that's kind of the point here, is that it's in you, right? Your body and your mind are capable of telling you when it is time to step away from something, when you need a period of recovery. And we have just often chosen or trained ourselves to ignore it because of pressures. And so many, if I just had to take like a circle of people with chronic pain and people who are people pleasers, they're like right over top of each other. And I think, stress is really tied to that. I mean, if you were conditioned to be constantly surveying the external environment and trying to appease folks around you, how can you possibly be tuned in to what's happening inside of you? So we have to write new rules here. And, I think there's a lot of overlap with chronic conditions, which don't always have pain, and stress associated with them, but like just in general, chronic experiences that keep showing up as discomfort in our bodies are not really acknowledged, or have not to date really been accounted for in our health, and our work. And I just want to have like a side note here that weight loss is not a useful health goal. So if you're going to spend time helping yourself have longevity, I hope I've at least made the case for you that longevity and increased quality of life is much better achieved through a practice that helps you build stress resilience rather than sweating whether or not you get your 10,000 steps in or whatever other things are being pushed on us by people who just want us to buy things. So the antidote to chronic stress effects is to anticipate. So your body has a natural set of tells, signals, um, that let us know that something is awry. We need to figure out how to tell they're coming and then take ourselves out of overstimulating environments. Just because the modern world has created like a toxic sludge of stimuli doesn't mean we need to sit in it. And we need to figure out how to be proactive. And it's like preventative mindfulness almost, if you think about it, in a way that feels good to you. And I really believe movement is so huge for this. And I see movement, as a healing practice. And then just stop blaming yourself for your reaction to stress. Like, remind yourself that we're just living in something that our ancestors couldn't possibly have imagined for us. And, we went from having our biggest problem be, am I going to eat this week, to like, how, do I have enough followers on social media, or, am I going to be able to afford healthcare bills, in a couple hundred years? I mean, it's crazy when you think about it. Um, and then pushing through discomfort helps nobody. I'll relax when, Friday comes or when I retire. Goodness, I hope not. But, you know, relax every single day. It is your right. Productivity is not how we measure our ability to show up as a valuable human being. So another moment of reflection here, is to think back to when we had our moment of reflecting on stress. So a lot of folks mentioned back pain and stomach pain and, a weight in the chest and all kinds of other really kind of strong physical signals. But what I want to challenge you to explore, and again, I think this is something you could take with you, um, is there something that comes before? Something a little more subtle, a feather instead of a brick. And what I've learned for me is that there's this like really negative critical voice in my head that will start getting super noisy. And then I'm like, okay, it's time to step away from whatever this is. And we don't know an explanation to anyone, really. And I think we need to, again, try to cultivate environments where leadership does not require that people show up 24 hours a day, which we know is not valuable or necessary. So I'm going to push through, but I would encourage you to also try to understand that for yourself, and feel free to share in the chat with each other if you would like. I want to take the last few minutes to just talk through the movement that we did and sort of how I would encourage you to use movement as a tool for every day for stress resilience. So you'll notice in the little practice that we did together, first of all, there's the exploratory movement. There's the idea that we don't tell the body what it's going to do. We move and let the body tell us, and let the body, give us information. It's like a chance to hear what the body has to say, and then kind of go with it and learn to respond to it and make it more of a conversation. And then there's just some general things like we did some rocking when we were doing our heels and toes. We did the flow of kind of rolling forward and back, and like the twisting. The nervous system really enjoys rocking and flow. It enjoys that intentional breath. Like those are ways to just bring some parasympathetic nervous system into your moment, right? It doesn't have to be like an hour long meditation, into your moment. And then just physically in the body, I really advocate for making sure that your movements include flexion, extension, rotation, and side bending. So you'll notice we did rounding the spine forward, opening it up, side bending, and rotation. To whatever degree, it feels good in your body, it's just a great idea to make sure you've gotten all of those key movements in. And then that squeeze and release. How do we teach the body what release feels like unless we point out that differentiation? And that's a trick you can use even in a meeting, as kind of like a way to kind of relax yourself, because it's like your body kind of finds the polar opposite. And it's also a really common thing during body scans. Um, so I'll just leave you with this thought of, what is one thing that you can commit to doing every single day to prevent the stress spiral, to build your resilience in a preventative way, so that your physical effects are less. It's not that the stress goes away or that you manage it better. It's that we acknowledge that stress is in the environment and we're putting on our little armor. And then how can you establish a boundary or request accountability, to support yourself in this? Because it's important that we also create community around the goals that we set for ourselves. And that helps us show up for ourselves, especially if you are a person who tends to put the needs of others ahead of yourself. And we want to make sure that we pour from a full cup. So hopefully you feel we tackled all of the goals that we had for our brief and wonderful time here together. And then if you want to be in touch with me, I welcome your questions and inquiries. These are ways that you can find me. And that is it.
DK, you are so amazing. Thank you. What an incredible way to like relax. And everything you say, I just want to bottle up and have it like written next to me all day because it's amazing reminder. So thank you. Thank you. And it was such an
My
engagement.
pleasure.
Thank you all so much. We will be raffling off DK's generous donation of Pilates packages. So stay tuned for that. We'll send a follow-up later today, and that's going to be via a randomized email. We're going to throw all your emails in, and it will be a random generator that will tell us who wins. So stay tuned. And thank you all so much. We'll see all of you if you're joining for our corporate panel next. We have some incredible ladies who have climbed their way up the corporate ladder and are going to be sharing their experiences. So thanks again, DK. We appreciate it, and we'll see you all soon.
Have fun, guys. Bye.